Welcome to the Blanco Wellness Podcast. Thank you for being here. Take a breath, settle in, and let's talk today about something that is almost certainly already in your life, and that you have probably stopped noticing. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that one thing from your life had simply disappeared. Not permanently, just for a single day. Your eyesight, your ability to walk without pain, the health you move through every day without thinking about, a person you love who is usually just there. Now imagine getting it back the following morning. How would the morning feel? How differently would you move through the day, knowing what the absence of that thing actually costs? The exercise is uncomfortable precisely because it reveals something true. Most of what is most valuable in a human life has become invisible, not because it lacks value, but because it is always there. And the human mind, which is remarkably good at adapting to new conditions, tends to adapt to good ones just as efficiently as it adapts to difficult ones. The thing you once hoped for, once worked toward, once worried you might never have, once it arrives and settles into the background of daily life, it stops registering, not because you are ungrateful, but because familiarity is one of the ways the mind processes stability. The extraordinary, encountered repeatedly, becomes ordinary. The gift, always present, becomes expected. The blessing, always there, becomes background noise. Think about your own life honestly. How many things are present in it right now that a younger version of yourself genuinely hoped for? The independence, the work, the relationship, the home, the friendships, the health that carries you through each day. At some point, these things lived in the future as things being wished for. Now they are here, and the mind has largely moved past them toward whatever is not yet secured. This is not ingratitude in any moral sense. It is simply the structure of a mind built to notice absence more readily than presence, to scan for what is missing more instinctively than to rest with what is there. The Buddhist tradition described this tendency clearly and without blame. The mind, left to its own default orientation, moves toward what is lacking, what could be improved, what is not yet resolved. This tendency was useful for survival over a very long history. The ancestors who noticed the gap, who identified what was missing and moved to address it, who stayed alert to insufficiency, tended to fare better than those who simply rested in what was there. But the same tendency that kept people alive now tends to make contentment structurally difficult, because it keeps the attention perpetually pointed at the gap, rather than at the ground. There is a man in a story who spent years in a state of mild but persistent dissatisfaction. His house seemed too small, his work too stressful, his life not quite what he felt it should be. Then he became seriously ill, genuinely ill, in a way that made everything else irrelevant for months. He recovered, and the first morning he woke up feeling genuinely well. He sat quietly for a long time with tears on his face. Not from sadness, from the sudden, overwhelming recognition that the life he had spent years being mildly dissatisfied with was actually extraordinary. That what he had been treating as insufficient was, looked at clearly and without the filter of comparison to something imagined and better, genuinely remarkable. He had needed the absence to see what had always been there. The challenge is learning to see it before life forces us to through loss. The Taoists found in nature a consistent reminder of this. A sunset lasts only a few minutes. Cherry blossoms bloom for one brief week each year. Autumn leaves reach their richest color just before they fall. None of these things last, and their brevity is precisely part of what makes them beautiful. The Japanese concept of mono no aware, the the poignant awareness of impermanence, describes how the recognition that something will not last tends to deepen rather than diminish our appreciation of it while it is here. If every sunset lasted indefinitely, we would stop watching them. If flowers never wilted, we would stop noticing when they bloomed. The impermanence is not a flaw. It is part of what gives things their quality of mattering. Your own life has this quality, this specific season of it, with these particular people and these particular circumstances, and this particular version of yourself. It is passing, the way all seasons pass. The things that feel permanent and unremarkable because they are always there are, in fact, temporary. The person who is usually just there, the health that carries you through each morning, the ordinary pleasures of an ordinary day, all of it is the cherry blossom, blooming briefly, worth actually looking at while it is here. Two people can move through nearly identical circumstances and have entirely different experiences of those circumstances, and the difference is almost entirely in where their attention is pointed. One notices the missing flower in the garden, while the other notices the hundreds that are blooming. One experiences their life as perpetually insufficient, while the other finds it genuinely abundant. And the external facts of the two lives are not meaningfully different. What is different is the quality of attention each brings, the direction each has trained their noticing to move in. This is what the Buddhist practice of gratitude is actually about at its most practical level, not the performance of positivity or the suppression of genuine difficulty, but the deliberate, repeated redirecting of attention toward what is actually present rather than toward what is absent. The redirecting is a practice because the default runs the other way, and practices are required precisely to move against a default. Think forward for a moment, genuinely, not performatively. Imagine looking back on this period of your life from 10 years ahead. What would you miss? What would you wish you had paused to appreciate more fully? Who would you wish you had given more of your unhurried attention? What ordinary things would suddenly appear from that distance to have been quietly extraordinary all along? The answers to those questions are not about a hypothetical future. They are describing what is present right now, today, already here, already available to be received, if enough attention arrives to receive it. As we close today, I want to leave you with something simple. Before you sleep tonight, think of 3 things you usually move past without noticing. 3 things that quietly support your life every day, that are simply there, that you rely on without acknowledging. Not the dramatic things, the ordinary ones. The body that woke you up this morning, the person who would answer if you called. The simple fact of being here, conscious, alive, in a world that contains more than any single life has time to fully attend to. Spend a moment with each of them, not as a ritual, not to feel better artificially, but as an honest act of finally looking at what has been there all along. It has been waiting for your attention. It always has been. Thank you for being here with me today. Until next time, be well.